The diet industry has made over $250 billion from your failure, not despite the fact that diets don't work, because of it. Think about the business model here. You buy a program. It works for a while. Then something shifts. The weight comes back. You blame yourself. And eventually, you buy another program. That cycle is not a bug in the system. It is the system. And the most frustrating part of all of it, the part that nobody in that industry wants you to understand, is that the failure almost certainly wasn't yours. The reason diets don't work is not discipline. It's not motivation. It's not your metabolism being uniquely broken. It's not your age, your genetics, or some hormonal mystery that only an expensive specialist can solve. It's that the approach was wrong. Specifically, the approach was fighting your biology instead of working with it. And biology wins that fight almost every single time. There is a different approach, one that doesn't ask you to fight anything, one that works with the same biological systems that made every other attempt so difficult. It's called microfasting. And once you understand exactly how it works, the actual mechanism, not the social media version, you will not feel confused about your history with weight loss anymore, because it will make complete sense, all of it. Why things worked temporarily, why they stopped, why the weight came back, and what you can actually do instead. Let's start with a number, 95. That is the percentage of people who lose significant weight on a traditional calorie restriction diet and then regain it. All of it within 5 years. Not most of it. All of it. And a meaningful percentage gain more than they started with. You have probably lived some version of this firsthand. You committed to something. It produced results. Real ones. You were proud of yourself. And then, gradually or suddenly, it reversed. And you were left with the weight and a new layer of self-blame. Here is what the science says about that. You did not fail the diet. The diet, structurally, biologically, failed you. When you restrict calories below what your body expects, your body doesn't treat that as a health intervention. It treats it as a threat. Specifically, it treats it as famine. And it responds to famine the same way it has responded to famine for hundreds of thousands of years, with every biological tool it has. Here's what that looks like inside your body in real time. Your hunger hormone, ghrelin, surges, not slightly. Research has shown ghrelin levels remaining chronically elevated for more than a year after significant weight loss. Your body is running a constant biological campaign to make you eat more. That is not a character flaw expressing itself as appetite. That is a hormonal instruction, and it is incredibly difficult to override with willpower alone over any extended period of time. At the same time, your resting metabolic rate drops. Your body becomes more efficient, which sounds like a good thing until you understand what efficiency means in this context. It means your body is burning fewer calories performing the same activities. It has downregulated its energy expenditure to match the reduced input because it thinks you are starving. And a body that thinks it's starving does not willingly burn reserves. It hoards them. There's a third adaptation that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Your brain simultaneously increases the reward value of food. The neural pathways connecting eating, pleasure, and relief become more active during caloric restriction. Food becomes more appealing, more emotionally charged. The pull toward eating gets stronger at exactly the moment when the diet is asking you to resist it most. So what you're actually fighting on a restrictive diet isn't just hunger. You're fighting a hormonal surge, a metabolic slowdown, and a neurologically amplified draw toward food. All at the same time, indefinitely. The fact that anyone maintains weight loss through calorie restriction is honestly remarkable. The fact that 95% don't should surprise nobody. Now here is the question the diet industry never asks. What if you didn't have to fight any of those things? What if there was a way to shift the biology, to get the fat burning, the hormonal reset, the metabolic improvement, without triggering the survival response at all? The answer comes down to one word: timing. Your body doesn't just have a calorie budget, it has a biological clock. a circadian system that governs when hormones rise and fall, when cellular repair runs, when fat stores are accessible, and when they're locked. Every diet you've ever tried focused on what you ate. Almost none of them addressed when. Microfasting addresses when. And that difference between managing calories and managing the clock is the entire reason it works when other approaches fail. Before anything else, let's clear something up. Microfasting is not the intermittent fasting you've probably heard about, or tried, or heard someone try and quit within a week, because I know exactly what happened. You heard about 16 to 8. You decided you would skip breakfast and not eat until noon. By 9 in the morning on day 1, you had a headache. By 11, you couldn't concentrate. By noon, you were eating so aggressively, you more than made up for the missed breakfast. By day 4, your mood was genuinely unpleasant. By day 7, you'd quietly gone back to your normal routine and filed this in the category of things that don't work for you. That is not a fasting problem. That is an entry problem. The most common version of intermittent fasting that people encounter asks you to make an immediate, dramatic shift. If you're currently eating across a 14 or 15-hour window, which is completely normal for most adults, and someone tells you to compress that to 8 hours starting Monday, that is a significant biological shock. Your hunger hormones don't care about your Monday motivation. They care about the patterns you've built over months or years. And those patterns don't vanish because you decided to fast. They fire anyway. And what you feel is intense, urgent, almost urgent hunger that has nothing to do with your energy needs and everything to do with the schedule your body expected you to follow. Microfasting is different in its approach. It starts from where you actually are, not where your aspirational self is, your actual current eating patterns, your actual schedule, your actual life. And it works by extending the overnight fasting window gradually, by 1 hour at a time across weeks, until your body has adapted to each new window before being asked to extend it further. The target is not 16 hours to start. The target is 12. 12 hours sounds almost insultingly simple when you first hear it. Finish dinner at 7. Don't eat again until 7 the next morning. Most of that is sleep. You're not sitting in the dark fighting cravings. You're simply not eating while you are unconscious. And yet what happens inside your body during those 12 hours, the hormonal cascade, the cellular repair, the metabolic shift, is genuinely significant. Significantly more significant than the effort involved. Your body runs on 2 completely separate fuel systems. The first is glucose, the sugar that comes from the food you eat, fast to access, easy to process, preferred fuel for your brain, your muscles, every cell in your body. As long as glucose is available, your body will use it. The second is fat, specifically the stored body fat your body has been accumulating for exactly this kind of situation. More energy-dense than glucose, effectively unlimited supply in most adults, but only accessible under the right conditions. Here is the fundamental rule of your body's fuel economy. As long as glucose is present, fat burning doesn't happen in any meaningful way. Your body will not go to the secondary fuel system while the primary one still has supply. Think of it as 2 generators powering a building. Generator 1, glucose, is running. Generator 2, fat, is sitting in the basement, fully functional, fully fueled. But your body will not start Generator 2 as long as Generator 1 is running. You have to wait for Generator 1 to run down, and only then does the switch flip automatically. Traditional calorie restriction diets try to force fat burning by reducing the fuel coming in through the front door. Eat less, create a deficit, body has to burn fat. The theory is sound. The execution triggers the survival response we already talked about. Because when you restrict calories, your body reads it not as a metabolic opportunity, but as a crisis. And in a crisis, it doesn't switch cleanly to fat burning. It slows your metabolism. It breaks down muscle tissue, which is energetically expensive to maintain, to free up resources. It spikes hunger hormones to force you to eat. And it increases the emotional reward value of food to get you to stop the restriction. Every one of those responses is working against the goal. Microfasting bypasses all of that. Instead of reducing the amount of fuel you put in, it simply extends the window in which you're not putting any in. After roughly 10 to 12 hours without food intake, glucose availability drops to the point where insulin falls. When insulin falls low enough, the hormonal conditions for fat release are met. The fat cell door opens, stored fat enters circulation, and your body's metabolic machinery uses it. Not because you starved yourself, not because you fought through hunger for hours. Because you waited long enough, consistently enough, for the chemistry to cooperate. The difference between those two approaches, fighting versus waiting, is the difference between a system that creates a survival response and one that works with your biology's existing design. And fat burning is just the beginning. Because around the 14 to 16 hour mark of a fasting window, something else activates. Something that has almost nothing to do with weight loss, and everything to do with the long-term health of every cell in your body. Something important enough that the scientific community gave out a Nobel Prize for understanding it. Around the 14 to 16 hour mark in a fasting window, your body activates autophagy. The word is from Greek. It literally means self-eating, which sounds alarming. It is one of the most elegant and important repair mechanisms your body possesses. Here is what actually happens. Your cells accumulate waste every day. From the constant metabolic work of being alive, proteins that have misfolded and can no longer do their job properly. Mitochondria, the energy-producing structures inside your cells that have become damaged or inefficient. Cellular debris of all kinds that builds up over time. Under normal operating conditions, meaning when you're eating frequently, that waste largely stays where it is. Accumulating, interfering in subtle and not-so-subtle ways with cellular function. Autophagy is your body's internal recycling program. When it activates, cells begin systematically identifying damaged or dysfunctional material, breaking it down into its raw components, and using those components to build new, healthy cellular structures. It's like a factory that periodically shuts down, clears out all the broken equipment, and uses the salvaged materials to upgrade the working machinery. This is not a theory on the fringe of science. In 2016, the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded to the Japanese cell biologist Yoshinori Ohsumi, specifically for his discoveries of the mechanisms underlying autophagy, one of the most prestigious scientific recognitions in the world, given for understanding how cells clean themselves, and when that cleaning starts. The research connecting autophagy to disease prevention is ongoing, but the picture developing is significant. Impaired autophagy has been associated with several neurodegenerative diseases, including Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, where the accumulation of damaged proteins in brain cells is a hallmark feature. It has been linked to metabolic dysfunction, to accelerated cellular aging, to chronic inflammatory states that underlie a wide range of modern disease. When autophagy runs regularly and effectively, your cells are better maintained. When it doesn't, they're not. Now here is the part that should genuinely stop you. Autophagy is suppressed by eating, not slightly inconvenienced. Suppressed. When you eat, insulin rises. Insulin activates signaling pathways, particularly a molecule called mTOR, that directly inhibit autophagy. When mTOR is active, your cells are in growth and building mode. Autophagy, the cleaning mode, shuts down. If you are eating every 2 to 4 hours, which many conventional nutrition approaches have recommended for blood sugar stability or metabolic boost, you're keeping those pathways active continuously. Autophagy never gets a meaningful window. Your cells never get the extended, uninterrupted time they need to run the cleaning cycle. Day after day, month after month, year after year. You are eating your way out of your own cellular maintenance system, and you didn't know it, because nobody explained this to you. The extended overnight window that microfasting creates gives autophagy the time it needs, not just occasionally, consistently, every night, as part of your regular rhythm. So we have fat burning, we have cellular repair, and we have one more piece that sits at the center of everything. The hormone that controls both of the above, and that most people have heard of, but almost nobody fully understands. Once you understand it, the whole picture clicks into place. Every time you eat anything, your pancreas releases insulin. That is not conditional. It applies to every food. Black coffee with a splash of cream, a small piece of fruit, a handful of almonds. Anything with calories produces an insulin response. The size of the response varies by what you ate, but the response always happens. Insulin's primary job, the one most people know, is to unlock your cells so that glucose can enter. Without insulin, glucose circulates in your blood but can't get into the cells that need it. Insulin is the key that opens the door. But insulin does something else, something that is not as widely understood, and it changes everything about how you think about eating patterns. When insulin is elevated, your fat cells are locked. Specifically, insulin activates an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, which promotes the storage of fat. At the same time, it suppresses the activity of hormone-sensitive lipase, the enzyme responsible for breaking down stored fat and releasing it into circulation to be used as fuel. High insulin means fat storage mode is active, fat release mode is off. Low insulin means the storage lock releases. Fat cells open. Stored energy becomes available. This is not complicated in principle. It is devastating in practice. Because here is what a standard modern eating day looks like from an insulin perspective. 7 a.m., breakfast. Insulin rises. 10 a.m., something small, a snack, a coffee with something in it. Insulin rises again before it's had time to fall from breakfast. Noon. Lunch. Insulin rises again. 3 p.m. Afternoon snack, piece of fruit, something from the office kitchen. Insulin rises. 6 p.m. Dinner. Insulin rises. 8 or 9 p.m., something small in the evening. Insulin rises one more time. You finally stop eating. Insulin starts to fall, but you're asleep within an hour or two, and you wake up and eat again in 7 or 8 hours. Before insulin has had anywhere near enough time to fall to the level where fat release is genuinely accessible. For millions of people eating this way, insulin is chronically elevated, never fully elevated, not at diabetic levels, but never fully low either, never low enough for long enough that the fat cell door really opens. They are metabolically stuck, not because they're doing something terribly wrong, because they were never told how the system actually works. A study published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that time-restricted eating, without reducing total caloric intake, improved insulin sensitivity in overweight adults. No diet, no food restriction, no calorie counting, just the window. Because the window is what lets insulin fall far enough, stay low long enough, for the fat cell door to open consistently. And when that happens, when fat is actually available as fuel on a regular basis, your metabolism starts doing what it was designed to do. And here is where we get to something that is deeply personal for most people. Because what metabolic inflexibility feels like from the inside is a very specific kind of experience. One you might recognize immediately. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You're sitting at your desk or wherever you spend your days, and something goes soft, not sleepy exactly, more like foggy, like someone turned the contrast down on your thinking. You reach for coffee, or something sweet, or both, and it helps, briefly, and then you need another one. And the day crawls forward. That is not normal aging. That is not just what afternoons feel like. That is metabolic inflexibility expressing itself. A metabolically flexible person can switch between burning glucose and burning fat smoothly, depending on what's available. When they've eaten recently, they run on glucose. When glucose starts to drop a few hours after eating, they transition seamlessly to fat burning. Energy stays stable. Focus stays stable. The transition is smooth enough to be invisible. A metabolically inflexible person, which describes most adults who have spent years eating frequently without extended fasting periods, cannot make that switch cleanly. When glucose starts to drop instead of transitioning to fat, the body panics. Stress hormones rise, cortisol spikes, cravings surge, cognitive function drops, and the body sends an urgent signal. Eat something now, not because you're genuinely energy depleted, because the transition mechanism is rusty. The backup generator hasn't been practiced. Metabolic. Flexibility is not fixed. It is a trainable state. Your body's ability to transition between fuel sources improves with practice. Specifically, practice created by regularly allowing glucose to fall enough that the body is forced to make the switch. Every consistent overnight fasting window is a training session. Every time your body successfully runs on fat instead of glucose, the transition gets smoother. The crash gets shallower, then lighter, then gone. What people consistently describe in the weeks after establishing a micro-fasting routine is not dramatic weight loss first. It's energy. Specifically, the experience of stable energy that doesn't ride the meal-to-meal roller coaster. Energy that's there at 9 a.m. and still present at 4 p.m. without requiring caffeine as a bridge. That is metabolic flexibility being rebuilt. And it is, for most people who experience it, one of the most noticeable quality of life changes of the whole process. Because it changes not just how much you weigh, it changes how you experience every hour of every day. Let's talk about why previous fasting attempts went badly. Because they did go badly, for most people. And there is a specific biological reason. The most common failure pattern, the one I mentioned earlier, is jumping too far, too fast. But let's go one level deeper, because understanding the mechanism helps you avoid repeating it. Ghrelin, the hormone primarily responsible for triggering the sensation of hunger, follows a circadian rhythm. It doesn't just spike in response to actual energy need. It spikes in anticipation of meals your body expects based on your recent history. If you have been eating breakfast at 7 in the morning for the last 5 years, your body has learned that pattern, and it prepares for it. Around 6:45, ghrelin starts rising, not because you're running out of fuel, because your body is running its pre-meal preparation routine. When you decide on a Monday that you will not eat until noon, that ghrelin surge fires at 6:45 anyway, because your body didn't get the memo. It doesn't care about your decision. It cares about the pattern. So you sit there at 7 a.m. feeling intense, urgent hunger that has nothing to do with your actual energy state. Your glycogen stores are fine. Your body has fuel, but you feel like you're starving, because ghrelin is telling you that you are. This is the primary reason aggressive fasting starts feel so horrible. It isn't a sign that fasting doesn't work for your body. It's a sign that your hormonal rhythm is still running on the old schedule. Here is what changes when you approach it gradually. Research on ghrelin adaptation shows that circadian ghrelin rhythms are malleable. When you consistently delay your first meal, not by hours on day 1, but by 30 to 60 minutes per week, the anticipatory ghrelin surge begins to follow. Within 1 to 2 weeks of a consistent shift, the pre-meal ghrelin spike starts appearing at the new time. Not at the old one. Your biology adjusts. But it needs time to do it, and it needs consistency to do it. Every failed fasting attempt that felt impossible within the first week wasn't a failure of your will. It was a collision with a hormonal pattern that needed gradual reshaping. Not forcing. Reshaping. So let's talk about how you actually do this, not aspirationally. Specifically, with a framework that accounts for where your biology actually is right now, not where you wish it was. Step 1. Find your current eating window, not your ideal one, your actual one. From the first thing that enters your mouth in the morning, and coffee with cream counts, anything with calories counts, to the last thing at night. For most people tracking this honestly for the first time, the answer is somewhere between 13 and 16 hours. It's larger than most people expect, because we don't usually think of the handful of something while cleaning up the kitchen as part of our eating window. But biologically, it is. Write down that number, That is your actual baseline. That is what you're working with. Step 2. Compress by 1 hour. 1, not 6, not 8, not even 2. 1. The most physiologically sensible place to find that hour is at the end of the day. Pushing the last meal or snack 30 to 60 minutes earlier is significantly easier than delaying the first meal of the day. This is because cortisol and ghrelin peak naturally in the morning, making morning hunger more intense and immediate. Evening hunger is more flexible and easier to redirect. If you currently finish eating at 10 p.m., finish at 9. Hold that for 2 weeks, exactly 2 weeks. Not until it feels perfect, until it feels unremarkable, until it's just what you do. When it feels unremarkable, compress again. Step 3. Target a 12-hour minimum window. 12 hours is where the meaningful metabolic shift begins. Insulin has had enough time to fall into a range where fat release is meaningfully possible. Low-level autophagy begins to activate. Metabolic flexibility training is underway. Practically, this looks like finishing dinner at 7 and not eating again until 7 the next morning. For most people, 6 to 8 hours of that window is sleep. The conscious portion is maybe 3 or 4 hours in the evening where you're not snacking, and a similar window in the morning before you eat. This is manageable. It is not heroic. It does not require a perfect schedule or exceptional willpower. It requires consistency, and consistency over time produces the hormonal adaptation that makes it feel easier. Step 4. Notice what changes in the right order. Because people quit at the wrong time because they're watching for the wrong signals. The first changes are not on the scale. The first changes are energy changes. Slightly more stable energy in the afternoons. Slightly deeper sleep. Slightly less urgency around hunger. A gradual reduction in the mental noise about food. The constant low-level thinking about what you're going to eat next. These are not minor secondary benefits. These are the biological markers of your metabolism shifting. They come first because the hormonal changes happen before the fat stores deplete enough to show on a scale. If you're looking for scale change in week 1 and not seeing it, you're checking the wrong instrument. Check your energy. Check your sleep. Check whether hunger feels more manageable. Scale changes follow. They always follow, but not first. Step 5. Extend only when the current window feels unremarkable. 14 hours produces more robust fat burning than 12. It produces deeper autophagy, greater insulin sensitivity improvement. But 14 hours should not be attempted until 12 hours feels like simply how you eat. Not a practice, not a diet, a pattern. For some people, 12 to 13 hours becomes the permanent baseline. That is enough to produce significant sustained results. There is no prize for going longer. The goal is not the longest fast. The goal is the most sustainable fast that produces consistent metabolic benefit. For most people, that lands between 12 and 14 hours. Let's talk about what to expect in order, because the most common reason people quit is that they expected the wrong thing at the wrong time. Days 1 through 7. Adjustment period. Your ghrelin rhythm is still calibrated to your old pattern. You will likely feel hunger at unusual times. You may feel lower energy in the first few days as your body begins the process of becoming more efficient at fat burning, a transition period where neither system is fully online. You may feel mildly irritable. This is not a sign that it's not working. This is a sign that something is changing. Stay with it. Days 7 through 14. The hormonal adaptation begins. Ghrelin starts shifting toward the new meal timing. Hunger at unusual times starts to settle. Many people notice sleep quality improving during this window. The extended overnight fast allows for more stable blood glucose levels during sleep, which reduces the cortisol spikes that fragment sleep architecture. Weeks 2 through 4. Energy changes become noticeable. The afternoon energy dip either lightens significantly or disappears. Hunger becomes more predictable and more manageable. The distinction between real hunger and habit hunger starts to become clear. And this is actually a significant moment because for many people, it's the first time they've experienced the difference. Weeks 4 through 8. Body composition changes begin, not necessarily dramatic, but consistent, because your body is now regularly accessing fat stores in a way that the chronic eating pattern never allowed. 3 months and beyond. Insulin sensitivity is measurably improved for most people. Metabolic flexibility is well established. The eating window feels like simply how you eat, not a protocol you're following. That last shift, from something you're doing to something you are, is the difference between a diet and a sustainable metabolic pattern, and it is the only thing that makes the results last. Let's talk about what else changes, because most people start microfasting for weight loss, and they get it. But weight loss is often not the thing they end up valuing most: your gut microbiome and its relationship to fasting. Your gut contains somewhere between 38 and 100 trillion microbial cells, bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other microorganisms that collectively form your gut microbiome. These organisms are not passengers. They are active participants in your metabolism, your immune function, your mood regulation, and your hormonal signaling. Research published in Cell over the past decade has established that the gut microbiome is not static. It is highly responsive to feeding patterns. Many of the beneficial bacterial species in your gut, the ones associated with reduced inflammation, better insulin sensitivity, and improved mental health outcomes, are sensitive to the timing of feeding. They have circadian rhythms of their own. They fluctuate in population across a 24-hour cycle. And they thrive when the host, you, gives them a consistent overnight period without food. When you eat constantly, including late at night, you disrupt those rhythms. The bacterial populations that are meant to recede overnight remain active. Fermentation continues when it shouldn't. The mucosal lining of the gut, which is largely maintained and repaired during fasting periods, gets less repair time. Time-restricted eating has been shown to positively shift gut microbiome composition in animal studies, and early human research suggests similar effects. More diverse, more populated with beneficial species. Better gut barrier integrity, which matters enormously because a compromised gut barrier, what's sometimes called leaky gut, is associated with systemic inflammation, insulin resistance, and a long list of other conditions. And then there is sleep. The connection between late-night eating, blood glucose, and sleep quality is one of the most underappreciated factors in how most people feel every day. When you eat close to sleep, within 2 to 3 hours, several things happen. Insulin rises, core body temperature rises because digestion generates heat, and both of those things work against the biological conditions your body needs to enter deep restorative sleep. Core body temperature needs to fall to initiate and maintain deep slow-wave sleep. Digestion actively works against that fall. What researchers have observed in people who shift their last meal earlier, who create even a 2 or 3 hour window between eating and sleep, is measurable improvement in sleep architecture. More time in deep slow-wave sleep, fewer nighttime awakenings, higher growth hormone output, which peaks during deep sleep and is involved in tissue repair, fat metabolism, and muscle maintenance. Better sleep produces lower cortisol. Lower cortisol reduces cravings, particularly for high-calorie, high-carbohydrate foods. Reduced cravings makes maintaining the eating window easier, which leads to better sleep. It is not a vicious cycle, it is a virtuous one, and it starts with moving dinner 30 minutes earlier. Inflammation markers. Chronic low-grade inflammation is now understood as an underlying factor in a remarkable number of conditions: cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, certain cancers, depression, neurodegenerative disease. It is not the same as the acute inflammation that comes from an injury. It is a persistent background state that slowly damages tissues and impairs function. Research on time-restricted eating has found reductions in several inflammatory biomarkers, including C-reactive protein and interleukin-6 in study participants. The mechanisms are multiple: better sleep, improved gut integrity, reduced insulin spikes, enhanced autophagy, and they compound. The point is this: when you start micro-fasting, you are not just creating conditions for fat loss, you are creating conditions where multiple interlocking biological systems start running more effectively. The benefits are not one thing, they are a cascade, and the entry point to all of it is the same: a window, consistent, graduated, biologically cooperative. Now let's clear away the objections, because there are a handful of things you've probably been told about fasting that are either wrong or significantly overstated. And they deserve a direct answer. Let's go through the common objections, because you've probably heard these, or thought them, or had someone say them to you when you mentioned fasting. Myth 1. Skipping breakfast destroys your metabolism. This one has been repeated so consistently that it became accepted as medical fact. It is not. The research on meal frequency and resting metabolic rate is actually quite clear. Total caloric intake matters significantly for metabolic rate. Meal frequency within normal ranges does not. Eating 3 meals versus 6 does not meaningfully change how many calories your body burns at rest. What does cause metabolic adaptation, the genuine slowdown people worry about, is prolonged severe caloric restriction, which is not what micro-fasting involves. You are eating the same food in a compressed window, not eating dramatically less. Myth 2. You'll lose muscle if you fast. Muscle loss becomes a meaningful concern in prolonged multi-day fasting combined with inadequate protein. For 12 to 16-hour fasting windows, the evidence does not support significant muscle breakdown. In fact, growth hormone, which rises during fasting periods, has a documented muscle-sparing effect. Your body is not immediately cannibalizing your muscle the moment you go 12 hours without food. It has a substantial amount of glucose and fat available to work with first. Myth 3. You need to eat immediately after waking to stabilize blood sugar. For most healthy adults, blood glucose is actively regulated overnight through a process called glycogenolysis, the liver releasing glucose as needed to maintain stable blood sugar during sleep. You do not wake up in a fragile glucose state that requires immediate food to stabilize. The belief that breakfast must be eaten immediately is, in large part, the result of decades of marketing by companies with a financial interest in you eating their morning products. The physiological necessity has been significantly overstated. Myth 4. Fasting triggers starvation mode. Starvation mode, the significant, prolonged metabolic adaptation that occurs in response to genuine famine, requires sustained, severe caloric restriction over extended periods. The research on starvation responses, including the famous Minnesota starvation experiment, involved men eating fewer than 800 calories per day for months. A 12 to 16-hour overnight fast does not produce this response. Your body has highly sophisticated hormonal mechanisms for distinguishing between an overnight fast and actual starvation. The two are not physiologically equivalent. Treating them as equivalent is not supported by the evidence. Myth 5. Fasting is extreme and only works for certain types of people. This one comes from conflating multi-day therapeutic fasts or extended clinical protocols with the simple act of extending the overnight window. Your body already fasts every night. Every single one of you. You fast while you sleep. The question is not whether you fast. You do? The question is how long that window is, and whether it's long enough for meaningful biology to happen. Micro-fasting is an extension of something your body already does naturally, every night, by design. The only thing that has changed in the modern food environment is how aggressively we close that window in the morning and how late we reopen it at night. Extending the overnight window by 1 or 2 hours is not an extreme intervention. It is a return toward a more biologically natural pattern, one that almost every human being followed for most of human history, not out of wisdom or health consciousness, but simply because food wasn't available around the clock. The around-the-clock availability is new, The biology is not, and the biology has not caught up with the availability. Microfasting is not asking you to do something extreme. It's asking you to stop doing something that is historically unusual, constant access and constant eating, and let your body run the systems it evolved to run during the periods in between. So let's come back to where we started. $250 billion, 95% failure rate, a biology that fights back against restriction with every tool it has. And on the other side of that, a window, a consistent, graduated, biologically cooperative window. That is the whole thing. Every diet you have ever tried asked you to be someone you're not. Someone who doesn't feel hunger the same way. Someone who can override biological signals indefinitely. Someone who can sustain restriction as a permanent state of being. And when you couldn't do it, when the biology won, as biology almost always does when it's in direct opposition with willpower, you were handed a story that you lacked discipline, that you didn't want it enough, that you were somehow constitutionally unable to do what other people managed to do. You carried that story, and you brought it into every subsequent attempt, already half defeated. That story is not true. It was never true. The method was wrong. Not you. Microfasting works, genuinely, sustainably works, for one specific reason. It does not ask you to fight your biology. It asks your biology to cooperate, and your biology will cooperate when you give it the right conditions, when you ask for the right thing, when you approach it gradually enough that adaptation can happen. You're not being asked to eat less. You're not giving up foods you love. You're not counting, measuring, tracking, or restricting in the way that triggers the survival response. You are shifting a window, gradually, consistently, and inside that window, your body does what it was designed to do. Insulin falls, fat cells open, autophagy runs, growth hormone rises, metabolic flexibility builds, energy stabilizes, sleep deepens. None of that requires you to be someone different. None of it requires exceptional discipline. It requires a window, consistent, patient, biologically cooperative. The diet industry spent $250 billion getting this wrong. It never had to be this complicated. The biology was always on your side. You just needed the right conditions to work with it instead of against it. Start tonight. Whatever time you finish eating, move it 30 minutes earlier. Not 2 hours, not 6, 30 minutes. That is step one. That is enough for tonight. Hold that for 2 weeks, and while you hold it, watch what changes. Not the scale first. Your energy, your sleep, the way hunger talks to you. Whether the 2 o'clock crash gets shallower, those signals are your biology beginning to cooperate. And that cooperation, once it begins, tends to keep building. In 2 weeks, come back and check in with yourself. Not with a scale necessarily. With the questions that actually matter. Am I sleeping better? Is my afternoon energy more stable? Do I feel less controlled by hunger and more in conversation with it? If the answer to any of those is yes, even partially, you have started something real, something your biology is participating in, not resisting, and from that foundation, everything else becomes possible. This channel covers the science of metabolic health in the same way we just did. No supplements to sell you, no program, no complicated system. Just the mechanisms, explained clearly, so you can make real decisions. If this video gave you something useful, share it with someone who needs it, someone who has been in the cycle, someone who has blamed themselves. Because this is information they needed a long time ago. Subscribe if you want more of it. We'll see you in the next one.